Hi, everybody. This is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you have yet to do so. And if you get anything from my work, connect the dot, an epiphany, a mind explosion, a new book to read, a new author to explore, please consider supporting my work. All the links are in the description of this video. It keeps me going and fed and the lights on. And if that is something you can do and you need an energy exchange besides getting wisdom and knowledge, all my artwork is at AllyKatzkreations211.com. Pyramids, hearts, office fun, all kinds of fun stuff. I customize things and I do everything privately, so that's just a portfolio. Email me and pricing and everything will be given to you. And I work with people. That's a beautiful thing. The Secret Teachers of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. We're just about done with this book. I'm really sad. We still have someone to go. Like one or two more things to read, which makes me sad because I really enjoyed this book. But we're not done just yet. Today we're going to read American Indian Symbolism. We'll see what he has to say about this. The North American Indian is by nature a symbolist, a mystic, and a philosopher. Like most Aboriginal peoples, his soul was in rapport with the cosmic agencies manifesting about him. Not only did his Mandios control creation from their exalted seats from above the clouds, but they also descended into the world of man and mingled with their red children. The gray clouds hanging over the horizon were the smoke from the calumets of the gods, who could build fires of petrified wood and use a comet for a flame. The American Indian people, the forests, rivers, and sky, with myriads of super physical and invisible beings. There are legends of entire tribes of Indians who lived in lake bottoms, of races who never seen in the daytime, but who, coming forth from their hidden caves, roamed the earth at night and waylay unwary travelers, also of bat Indians and with human bodies and bat-like wings, who lived in gloomy forests and inaccessible cliffs, and who slept hanging head downward from great branches and outcroppings of rock. Pause. Mothman? I don't equate the Mothman. That would be the closest thing that I could think of in lore that would come close to what is being described here, and I don't consider that Native American. I would have to look further in, and I've done a lot of research on natives, nations, for my own spiritual purposes. Interesting here. The red man's philosophy of elemental creatures is apparently the outcome of his innate contact with nature, whose inexplicable wonders become the generating cause of such metaphysical speculations. In common with early Scandinavians, Indians of North America considered the earth, the great mother, to be intermediate plane, bounded above by a heavenly sphere, the dwelling place of the Great Spirit, and below by a dark and terrifying subterranean world, the abode of shadows and submundane powers. Like the Chaldeans, they divided their interval between the surface of earth and heaven into various strata, one consisting of clouds, another of the paths of the heavenly bodies, and so on. The underworld was similarly divided, and like the Greek system, represented to the initiated the house of the lesser mysteries. Those creatures capable of functioning in two or more elements were considered as messengers between the spirits of these various planes. The abode of the dead was presumed to be in a distinct place in the heaven above, the earth's below, the distant corners of the world, or across the wide seas. Sometimes a river flows between the world of the dead and that of the living, in this respect, paralleling Egyptian, Greek, and Christian theology. To the Indian, the number 4 has a peculiar sanctity, presumably because the Great Spirit created his universe in a square frame. This is suggestive of the veneration accorded to the tetrad by the Pythagoreans, who held it to be a fitting symbol of the Creator. Legendary narratives of the strange adventures of interpret heroes who, while in the physical body, penetrated the realms of the dead, prove beyond question the presence of mystery cults among the North American red men. Wherever the mysteries were established, they were recognized as the philosophic equivalents of death. For those passing through the rituals experience all after-death conditions while still in the physical body. At the consummation of the ritual, the initiate actually gained the ability to pass in and out of his physical body at will. This is the philosophic foundation for the allegories of adventures in the Indian shadow land or world of ghosts. From coast to coast, writes Hartley Burr Alexander, the sacred calumet is the Indian's altar, and its smoke is the proper offering to heaven. In the notes on the same work is given the following description of the pipe ceremony. The master of ceremonies again rises to his feet, filled and lighted the pipe apiece from his own fire. Drawing 3 whiffs, one after the other, he blew the first towards the zenith, the second towards the ground, and the third towards the sun. By the first act, he returned thanks to the Great Spirit for the preservation of his life during the past year, and for being permitted to be present in this council. By the second, he returned thanks to his mother, the earth, for her various productions which had administered to his substance. And by the third, he returned thanks to the sun for never failing light, ever shining upon all. It was necessary for the Indian to secure the red stone for his calumet from the pipestone quarry, where in some remote past the Great Spirit had come, and after fashioning with his own hands a great pipe, had smoked it toward the 4 corners of creation, and this instituted the most sacred ceremony. Scores of Indian tribes, some of them traveling thousands of miles, secured the sacred stone for this single quarry, where the mandate of the Great Spirit had decreed the eternal peace should reign. The Indian does not worship the sun. He rather regards the shining orb as an appropriate symbol of the great and good spirit, who forever radiates life to his red children. In Indian symbolism, the serpent, especially the great serpent, corroborates other evidence pointing to the presence of the mysteries on the North American continent. The flying serpent is the Atlantean token of this initiate. The 7-headed snake represents the 7 great Atlantean islands, the cities of Chiboa, and also the 7 great prehistoric schools of esoteric philosophy. Moreover, who can doubt the presence of the secret doctrine in the Americas when he gazes upon the Great Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio, where the huge reptile is represented as disgorging the egg of existence? Many American Indian tribes are reincarnationalists. Some are mitigationists. They even call their children by the names supposed to have been born by them in a former life. There is an account of an instance where a parent, by inadvertently I'm going to skip that word because my brain just went blank, had given his infant the wrong name, whereupon the babe cried incessantly until the mistake had been rectified. The belief in reincarnation is also prevalent among the Eskimos. Aged Eskimos not infrequently kill themselves in order to reincarnate in the family of some newly married loved one. The American Indians recognize the difference between the ghost and the actual soul of a dead person, a knowledge restricted to initiates of the mysteries. In common with the Platonists, they also understood the principle of an archetypal sphere within exists the patterns of all forms manifesting in the earth plane. The theory of group or elder souls having supervision over the animal species is also shared by them. The red man's belief in guardian spirits would have warmed the heart of Persilius. When they obtained the importance of being protectors of entire clans or tribes, these guardians are called totems. In some tribes, impressive ceremonies mark the occasion when the young men are sent out into the forest to fast and pray, and there remain until their guardian spirit manifests to them. Whatever creature appears upon becomes their peculiar genius, to whom they appeal in time of trouble. The outstanding hero of North American Indian folklore is Hiawatha, a name which, according to Lewis Spence, signifies he who seeks the wampum belt. Hiawatha enjoys the distinction of anticipating by several centuries the late Woodrow Wilson's cherished dream of the League of Nations, following in the footsteps of Schoolcraft. Longfellow confused the historical Hiawatha of the Iroquois with the Manabozho, a mythical hero of the Algonquins and Ojibwas. Hiawatha, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing those tribe names, a chief of the Iroquois, after many reverse and disappointments, succeeded in uniting the 5 great nations of the Iroquois into the League of the 5 Nations. The original purpose of the League is to abolish war by substituting councils of arbitration. Was not wholly successful, but the power of the silver chain conferred upon the Iroquois a solidarity obtained by no other confederacy of North American Indians. Hiawatha, however, met the same opposition when was confronted every great idealist, irrespective of time or race. The shamans turned their magic against him, and according to one legend, created an evil bird which, swooping down from heaven, tore his only daughter to pieces before his eyes. When Hiawatha, after accomplishing his mission, had sailed away in his self-propelled canoe along the path of the sunset, his people realized the true greatness of their benefactor and elevated him to the dignity of demigod. In Longfellow's Song of Hiawatha, the poet has cast the great Indian statesman in a charming setting of magic and enchantment. Yet, though through the maze of symbol and allegory is ever faintly visible the figure of Hiawatha and the initiate, the very personification of Red Man and his philosophy. This is on the Popol Vuh. Now, before I even begin, there is going to be names and entities here that I am totally going to butcher the pronunciation of their names. So mind you, I'm not here once again to disrespect anybody or anything. I do have projection issues, getting words out of my mouth, pronunciating things properly. My teeth do fall out of my face. They're not glued in. See that right there? Like my teeth can fold right down. So mind you, I'm not here to be disrespectful. No other sacred book sets forth so completely as the Popol Vuh, the initiatory rituals of a great school of mystical philosophy. The volume alone is sufficient to establish incontestably the philosophical excellence of the red race. The red children of the sun, writes James Morgan Preece, do not worship the one God. For them, that one God is absolutely impersonal, and all the forces emanated from that one God is personal. This is the exact reverse of the popular Western conception of the personal God and impersonal working forces in nature. Decide for yourself which of these beliefs is the more philosophical. These children of the sun adore the plumed serpent, who is the messenger of the sun. He was the god Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, Gucmaz in Quinch, and in Peru he was called Amaru. From the later name comes our word America. America is literally translated land of the plumed serpent. The priests of the god of peace from their chief center in the Corderas, I'm totally butchering that, once ruled both, and I took Spanish, by the way, in school, and I excelled in Spanish. Yeeps! Once ruled both Americas, all the red men who have remained true to the ancient religion are still under their sway. One of their strong centers was Guatemala, and of their order was the author of the book called Popol Vuh. In the Quiche tongue, Gucumas is the exact equivalent of Quetzalcoatl in the Nahuatl language. Quetzal, the bird of paradise, Quetzal, serpent, the serpent veiled in plumes of the paradise bird. The Popol Vuh was discovered by Father Zymes. Sorry, like I said, I'm going to butcher a lot here. In the 17th century, it was translated into French by Brassier de Beaubourg and published in 1861. The only complete English translation is that of Kenneth Sylvan Guthrie, which ran through the early files of the Word magazine and which is used on the basis of this article. A portion of the Popol Vuh was translated into English with extremely valuable commentaries by James Morgan Price. But unfortunately, his translation was never completed. The second book of the Popol Vuh is largely devoted to the initiatory rituals of the Quiche nation. These ceremonials are of the first importance to students of Masonic symbolism and mystical philosophy, since they establish beyond doubt the existence of ancient and divinely instituted mystery schools on the American continent. Lewis Spencer is describing the Popol Vuh, gives a number of translations of the title of the manuscript itself, passing over the renditions, the Book of the Mat, and the record of the community. He considers it likely that the correct title is the collection of written leaves. Popol, signifying the prepared bark, and vuh, paper or book, from the verb yak, to write. Dr. Guthrie interprets the word Popol Vuh to mean the Senate book, or the Book of the Holy Assembly. Brassier de Beaubourg calls it the Sacred Book, and Father Zymes designates the volume the National Book. In his articles on the Popol Vuh, appearing in the 5th volume of Lucifer, James Morgan Price, approaching the subject from the standpoint of the mystic, calls the work the Book of the Azure Veil. In the Popol Vuh itself, the ancient records from which the Christianized Indian who compiled it derived his material are referred to as the tale of human existence in the land of shadows, and how man saw light and life. The meager available native records contain abundant evidence that the later civilizations of Central and South America were hopelessly dominated by the black arts of their priestcrafts. In the convexities of their materialized mirrors, the Indian sorcerers captured the intelligence of elemental beings. Gazing into the depths of these abominable devices eventually made the specter subservient to the wand. Robed in garments of sable hue, the neophytes in their search for truth were led by their sinister guides through the confused passageways of necromancy. By the left-handed path, they descended into the somber depths of the infernal world, where they learned to endow stones with the power of speech and subtly ensnare the minds of men with their chants and fetishes. As typical of the perversion which prevailed, none could achieve to the greater mysteries until a human being had suffered immolation at his hand, and the bleeding heart of the victim had been elevated before the leering face of the stone idol fabricated by a priestcraft, the members of which realized more fully than dared to admit the true nature of the man-made demon. The sanguinary and indescribable rites practiced by many of the Central American Indians may represent remnants of the later Atlantean perversion of the ancient sun mysteries. According to the secret tradition, it was during the later Atlantean epoch that black magic and sorcery dominated esoteric schools, resulting in the bloody sacrificial rites and gruesome idolatry, which ultimately overthrew the Atlantean Empire and even penetrated the Aryan religious world. The mysteries of Zybalba. Eeps. The princes of Zybalba, so the Popol Vuh recounts, sent their 4 owl messengers to Hunhun, Apu, and Hakub Hunhun Abu. Sorry, I'm butchering that. Ordering them to come at once to the place of the initiation in the fastness of the Guatemalan mountains. Failing in the tests imposed by the princes of Zalbaba, the 2 brothers, according to the ancient custom, paid with their lives for the shortcomings. Hunhun Apa and Vukub Hamhun Abu were buried together, but the head of Hunhun Apu was placed among the branches of the sacred calabash tree, which grew in the middle of the road, leading to the awful mysteries of Zibaba. I know, I'm trying. Immediately, the calabash tree covered itself with fruit, and the head of Hunhun Apu showed itself no more, for it reunited itself with the other fruits of the calabash tree. Now, Zukwi was the virgin daughter of the prince Chumakwik, maybe. From her father, she had learned of the marvelous calabash tree, and desiring to possess some of its fruit, she journeyed alone to the somber place where it grew. When Kui, I'm going to just say Kui, because I don't know how to pronounce that, put forth her hand to pick the fruit of the tree, some saliva from the mouth of Hunhun Apu fell into it, and the head spoke to Kui, saying, "This saliva and froth is my prosperity, which I have just given to you. Now my head will cease to speak, for it is only the head of a corpse which has no more flesh." Following the abnegations of Hunhun Apu, the young girl returned to her home. Her father, Kui, later discovering that she was about to become a mother, questioned her concerning the father of her child. Kui replied that the child was begotten while she was gazing upon the head of Hunhun Apu in the calabash tree, and that she had known no man. Her father, refusing to believe her story at the instigation of the princes of Zalbabal, whatever the name of that land is, demanded her heart in an urn. Led away by her executioners, Kui pleaded with them to spare her life, which they agreed to do, substituting for her heart the fruit of a certain tree, rubber, whose sap was red and the consistency of blood. When the princes of Zabalba placed the supposed heart upon the coals of the altar to be consumed, they were all amazed by the perfume which rose therefrom, for they did not know that they were burning the fruit of a fragrant plant. Kui gave birth to twin sons who were named Huna Apu and Blanik, and whose lives were dedicated to avenging the deaths of Han Apu and Ku Akub Han Apu. The years passed, and these 2 boys grew up to manhood and great with their deeds, especially they excelled in a certain game called tennis, but somewhat resembling hockey. Hearing of the prowess of the youths, the princes of Zybalba asked, "Who then are those who, now being again to play over our heads, and who do not scruple to shake the earth? Are not Hanhanapu and Vukub Hanhanapu dead, who wish to exalt themselves before our face?" So the princes of Zabalba sent for the 2 youths, Huna Apu and Blahnik, that they might destroy them also in the 7 days of mysteries. Before departing, the two brothers bade farewell to their grandmother, each planting in the midst of the house a cane plant, saying that as long as the cane lived, she would know that they were alive. Oh, our grandmother, oh, our mother, do not weep. Behold the sign of our word, which remains with you. Huna Apu and Blahnik then departed with his Sabrakan blowpipe, and for many days they journeyed along the perilous trail, descending through tortuous ravines and along cliffs, past strange birds and boiling springs toward the sanctuary of Zebul. However you say it, the actual ordeals of the Zybalbarian mysteries were 7 in number. As preliminary, the two adventurers crossed a river and mud and then stream of blood, accomplishing these difficult feats by using their sabrakans as bridges. Continuing on their way, they reached a point where 4 roads converged: a black road, a white road, a red road, and a green road. Now Hanahapu and Blahnik knew that their first test was consisted of being able to discriminate between the princes of Zybalba and the wooden effigies robed and resembled them. Also, they must call each of the princes by his correct name without having been given the information. To secure this information, Hanahapu pulled a hair from his leg, which hair then became a strange insect called Zan. Buzzing along the black road, Zan entered the council chamber of the princes of Zybalba and stung the leg of the future nearest the door, which it discovered to be a mannequin. By the same artifact, the second figure was proved to be of wood. But upon stinging the third, there was an immediate response. By stinging each of the 12 assembled princes, in turn, the insect thus discovered each one's name, for the princes called each other by the name in discussing the cause of the mysterious bites. Having secured the desired information in the novel manner, the insect then flew back to Hanahapu and Blahnik, who thus fortified fearlessly approached the threshold of Zybalba and presented themselves to the 12 assembled princes. When told to adore the king, Hanahapu and Blahnik laughed, for they knew the figure pointed out to them was the lifeless mannequin. The young adventurers thereupon addressed the 12 princes by thus named: Hail, Hunkim, Hail, Vu Kab Kame, Hail. I can't get there. I'm not going to get to the rest of these. Holy shit. Hala Apu, Hail Allakana. This is just like a waspy, by the way, if anybody knows me and a waspy names. So I'm not going to read the names, but you can look that up on the internet if you're interested in what this tale is. When invited by the Zalbarbians to sit next to themselves upon a great stone bench, Hanahapu and Blahnik declined to do so, declaring that they well knew the stone to be heated so that they would be burned to death if they sat on it. The princes of Zalbalba then ordered Hanahapu and Blahnik to rest for the night in the House of Shadows. This completed the first degree of the Zalbabian mysteries. The second trial was given in the House of Shadows, where to each of the candidates were brought a pine torch and a cigar, with the injunction that both must be kept alight throughout the entire night, and yet each must be returned the next morning unconsumed. Knowing the death was the alternate to failure in the test, the young men burnt Arius feathers in place of the pine splinters, which they closely resembled, and also put fireflies on the tips of the cigars. Seeing the lights, those who watched felt certain that Hanahapu and Blahnik had fallen into the trap. But when morning came, the torches and cigars were turned to the guards, unconsumed and still burning. In amazement and awe, the prince of Zalababia gazed upon the consumed splinters and cigars, for never before had this been returned intact. The third ordeal took place presumably in a cavern called the House of Spears. Here, hour after hour, the youths were forced to defend themselves against the strongest and the most skillful warriors armed with spears. Hanaapu and Blanik pacified the spearmen, who thereupon ceased attacking them. They then turned their attention to the second and most difficult part of the test, the production of 4 vases of the rarest flowers, but which they were not permitted to leave the temple to gather. Unable to pass the guards, the 2 young men secured the assistance of ants. These tiny creatures, crawling into the garden of the temple, brought back the blossoms, so that by morning the vases were filled. When Hanahapu and Blanik presented the flowers to the 12 princes, the latter, in amazement, recognized the blossoms as having been flinched from their own private gardens. In consternation, the princes of Zabalba then counseled together how they could destroy the intrepid neophytes and withstand prepared for them the next ordeal. For their 4th test, the 2 brothers were made to enter the House of Cold, where they remained for an entire night. The prince of Zalbalba considered the chill of the icy cavern to be unbearable, and it is described as the abode of the frozen winds of the north. Hanahapu and Blanik, however, protected themselves from the deadening influence of the frozen air, by building fires of pine cones, whose warmth caused the spirit of cold to leave the cavern, so that the youths were not dead, but full of life when day dawned. Even after then, before the amazement of the princes, Albabia, when Hanahapu and Blanik again entered the hall of assembly in the custody of their guardians. The 5th ordeal was also of a nocturnal nature. Hanahapu and Blanik were ushered into a great chamber which was immediately filled with ferocious tigers. Here they were forced to remain throughout the night. The young men tossed bones to the tigers, which they ground to pieces with their strong jaws. Gazing into the house of the tigers, the prince of Zalbaba beheld the animals chewing the bones and said one to another, "They have at least learned to know the power of Zalbalba, and they have given themselves up to the beast." But when at dawn, Hanahapu and Blanik emerged from the house of tigers unharmed, the Zalbabians cried, "Of what race are those?" For they could not understand how any man could escape the tiger's fury. Then the princes of Zalbalba prepared for 2 brothers a new ordeal. The 6th test consisted of remaining from sunset to sunrise in the house of fire. Hanahapu and Blanik entered a large apartment arranged like a furnace. On every side the flames arose and the air was stifling. So great was the heat that those who entered this chamber could survive only a few minutes. But at sunrise, when the doors of the furnace were opened, Hanahapu and Blanik came forth unscorched by the fury of the flames. The prince of Zalbalba, perceiving how the 2 intrepid youths have survived every ordeal prepared for their destruction, were filled with fear lest all the secrets of Zalbalbia should fall into the hands of Hanahapu and Blanik. So they prepared the last ordeal, an ordeal yet more terrible than any which had gone before, certain that the youths could not withstand the crucial test. The 7th ordeal took place in the House of Bats. Here is a dark subterranean labyrinth lurked many strange and odorous creatures of destruction. Huge bars fluttered dismally through the corridors and hung with folded wings from the carving of the walls and ceilings. Here also dwelt Kamazuts, the god of bats, a hideous monster with the body of man, and the wings and head of a bat. Kamazuts carried a great sword, and soaring through the gloom, decapitated with a single sweep of his blade any unwary wanderers seeking to find their way through the terror-filled chambers. Blanik passed successfully through the horrifying test, but Hanahapu, caught off his guard, was beheaded by Kamasuts. Later, Hanahapu was restored to life by magic, and two brothers, having thus foiled every attempt against their lives by the Zalbabians, in order to better average the murder of Hanahapu and Vukab Hanahapu, permitted themselves to be burned upon a funeral pyre. Their powdered bones were then cast into the river and immediately became two great man fishes. Later, taking upon themselves the forms of aged wanderers, they danced for the Zalbabians and wrought strange miracles. Thus, one would cut the other to pieces with a single sword, resurrected him, or they would burn houses by magic and then instantly rebuild them. The fame of the two dancers, who were in reality Hanahapu and Blanik, finally came to the notice of the 12 princes of Zalbabia, who thereupon desired these two miracle workers to perform their strange feats before them. After Hanahapu and Blanik had slain the dog of a prince and restored it to life, had burned the royal palace and instantly rebuilt it, and given other demonstrations of their magical powers, the monarch of the Zalbabians asked the magicians to destroy him and restore him also to life. So Hanahapu and Blanik slew the princes of Zalbabia, but did not return them to life, thereby avenging the murder of Hanahapu and Vu Akub Hanahapu. These heroes later ascended to heaven, where they became the celestial lights. Bananas. Keys to the mystery of Zybalba. Do not these initiations, writes Plagon, vividly recall to the mind that Hinnock said he saw in his visions, the blazing house of crystal burning hot and icy cold, that place where were the bow of fire, the quiver of arrows, the sword of fire, that other where he had to cross the babbling stream in the river of fire, and those extremities of the earth full of all kinds of huge beasts and birds, or the habitation where appeared one of the great glories sitting upon the orb of the sun. And lastly, does not the tamarind tree in the midst of the earth, that he was cold, was a tree of knowledge, find its simile in the calabash tree in the middle of the road, where these and those of the Zalbabian placed the head of Hun Apu, after sacrificing for having failed to support the first trial of the initiation. These were the awful ordeals that the candidates for initiation into the sacred mysteries had to pass through in Zalbalba. Do they not seem an exact counterpart of what happened in the milder form at the initiation in the Ecclesian mysteries, and also the greater mysteries of Egypt, from which these were copied? Does not the recital of what the candidates to the mysteries in Zalbalba were required to know before being admitted recall to the mind of the wonderful similar feats said to be performed by the Mahatmas and the brothers in India, and of several other passages of the book of Daniel, who had been initiated into the mysteries of the Chaldeans or Magi, which according to Alubius were divided into three classes or genera, the highest being the most learned. In his introductory notes to the Popol Vuh, Dr. Guthrie presents a number of important parallelisms between this sacred book of Quinches and the secret writings of other civilizations, and the test through which Hanahapu and Blanik are forced to pass. He finds the following analogy with the signs of the zodiac as employed in the mysteries of Egyptians, Chaldeans, and Greeks. Aries crossing the river of mud, Taurus crossing the river of blood, Gemini detecting the two dummy kings, Cancer the house of darkness, Leo the house of spheres, Virgo the house of cold, the usual trip to hell, Libra the house of tigers, feline pose, Scorpio the house of fire, Sagittarius the house of bats, where the god Kamasos decapitates one of their heroes, Capricorn, the burning of the scaffold, the dual phoenix, Aquarius, their ashes being scattered in a river. Pisces, their ashes turning into man fishes and later back into human form. It would seem more appropriate to assign the river of blood to Aries than that of mud to Taurus, and it is not at all improbable that in the ancient form of the legend, the order of the rivers were reversed. Dr. Gumthree's most astonishing conclusion in his effort to identify Zalbaba with the ancient continent of Atlantis. He sees in the 12 princes of Zalbaba the rulers of the Atlantean Empire, and in the destruction of these princes by the magic of Hanahapu and Blanik, an allegorical depiction of the tragic end of Atlantis. To the initiated, however, it is evident that Atlantis is simply a symbolic figure in which it is set forth the mystery of origins. Concerned primarily with the problems of mystical anatomy, Mr. Prees relates the various symbols described in the Popol Vuh to the occult centers of consciousness in the human body. Accordingly, he sees that the elastic ball, the pineal gland, and the Hanahapu and Blanik, the dual electric current directed along the spinal column. Unfortunately, Mr. Price did not translate the portion of the Popol Vuh dealing directly with the initiatory ceremonial. Zalbaba he considers to be the shadowy or etheric sphere, which according to the mystery teachings was located within the body of the planet itself. The fourth book of the Popol Vuh concludes with an account of an erection of a mystical temple, all white, where was preserved a secret black divining stone, cubical in shape. Gukmat, or Quetzalcoatl, partakes of many of the attributes of King Solomon. The account of the temple building in the Popol Vuh is a reminder of the story of Solomon's temple and undoubtedly has a similar significance. Brossard de Barbourg was first attracted to the study of religious parallelisms in the Popol Vuh by the fact that the temple, together with the black stone which is contained, was named the Kaaba, a name astonishingly similar to that temple of Kaaba, which contains the sacred black stone of Islam. The exploits of Hanahapu and Blanik take place before the actual creation of the human race, and therefore are to be considered essentially as spiritual mysteries. Zybalba doubtless signifies the inferior universe of Chaldean and Pythagorean philosophy. The princes of Zalbalba are the 12 governors of the lower universe, and the two dummies are the mannequins in their midst, may be interpreted as the two false signs of the ancient zodiac, interested in the heavens to make the astronomical mysteries incomprehensible to the profane. The descent of Hanahapu and Blanik into the subterranean kingdom of Zalbalba by crossing over the rivers on bridges made from their blowguns has a subtle analogy to the descent of the spiritual nature of man into the physical body through certain superphysical channels that may be likened to the blowguns or tubes. The Sacarian is also an appropriate emblem of the spinal cord and the power resonant within its tiny central opening. The two youths are invited to play the game of life with the gods of death, and only with the aid of supernatural power imparted to them by the sages can they triumph over these gloomy lords. The tests represent the soul wandering through the sub-zodiacal realms of the created universe. Their final victory over the lords of death represents the ascension of the spiritual and illumined consciousness from the lower nature, which has been wholly consumed by the fire of spiritual purification. Agreed. That the Quincies possessed the keys to the mystery of regeneration is evident from an analysis of the symbols appearing upon the images of their priests and gods in Volume 2 of the Annals de Museo Nacional de Mexico, is reproduced by the head of an image generally considered a represent Quetzalcoatl. The sculpturing is distinctly oriental in character, and on the crown of the head appeared both the thousand-petaled sunburst of spiritual illumination and the serpent of the liberated spinal fire. The Hindu chakra is unmistakable, and it is frequently appears in the religious art of the three Americas. One of the carved monoliths of Central America is adorned with the heads of two elephants with their drivers. No such animals have existed in the Western Hemisphere since prehistoric times, and it is evident that the carvings are the result of a contact with the distant continent of Asia. Among the mysteries of the Central American Indians is a remarkable doctrine concerning the consecrated mantles, or as they were called in Europe, magic capes. Because their glory was fatal to mortal vision, the gods then appearing to the initiated priests robed themselves with these mantles. Allegory and fable likewise are the mantles with which the secret doctrine is ever enveloped. Such a magic cape of concealment is the Popol Vuh, and deep within its folds sits the god of Quincy philosophy. The massive pyramids, temples, and monoliths of Central America may be likened also to the feet of gods, whose upper part are enshrouded in magic mantles of invisibility. That ends that section. Next time, the mysteries of their emissaries. We're getting so close to the end. Which reminds me, if you're interested in stories like that, go read Carlos Castaneda, because his stories are based in Central America, starting off in Mexico and further down into the continent of South America. Very interesting, very similar to the shadow work, going through the dark night of the soul, going through that rebirth, death. It's all allegory. But a lot of us are going through this big change right now. Things are uprooting and heavy energy right now for so many of us. So that was a really interesting take on things, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for joining me. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Sending each and every one of you love, light, compassion, grace, shielding, and protective energy. Please go within. Be the shoulder to lean on. Be the lighthouse. Seed your truths. Go to your heart. And I hope to see you guys on the next one. Have a great and fantastic day. Bye for now.